Hello, and welcome to The Kosh. I'm your host, Timber Smith, and The Kosh is a podcast that spotlights people who've had an association with the Kosh and the surrounding Fox Cities area. Kosh listeners, how are we doing this morning? As you can tell, well, let me just give you the warning sign right now. Bosco, the podcast dog, has decided that he wants to eat his bone right here on the stand of the microphone. And so we're going to hear a little clangety clang for a little bit until we chase Bosco away. I did start him off with peanut butter this morning, which is usually how we keep him calm during the podcast, but he killed the peanut butter very quickly, so it didn't last long. All right, let me give you the report. It is a beautiful Wisconsin day. It is sunny outside, but it is crisp, which now it is finally maybe feeling a little bit more like what you would expect it to feel in December, at least a little bit. And no, I'm still grateful that we did not have a white Christmas. And y'all can hate me if you want, but I'm just telling it the way it is. All right. Now, let's get down to the real business at hand and why we are here at the Kosh. Oh, yes, I made that cardinal mistake, but we're gonna give it a shot. And you know what the cardinal mistake is? That means that I forgot to ask my guests how to say their name. Well, we're going for it. It's one of those days. All right. Well, but more importantly, you know what I'm gonna say. You know what I'm gonna say. I do not know how I continue to get all of these amazing guests. And I'm super excited about today's guest because we were having this really, really quality conversation before we were recording. And sometimes I just know, okay, there's going to be a vibe in the space. And today is going to be an episode with a vibe. And I believe we're going to talk about some pretty impactful things. And that always gets me geeked. And I hope that you as the Kosh listeners, it geeks you up too. So without further ado, this week's guest is Billy Korinko.
So close.
Oh, okay. Give it
Korinko.
Korinko.
Billy Korinko.
Oh, I was close. All right.
Very close.
Well, know this. You fit into a long line of guest names who I have slaughtered over time.
I'm honored.
You should. Well, it's kind of like a very special group. Know that there is never any disrespect. I do my best at it, but I'm not gifted at it. Well, good. We're just going to call you Billy.
Cool with that.
All right. Fantastic. You ready to jump in, Billy? How are we feeling this morning?
I'm good. I had a little bit too much coffee. I said that earlier. So if my energy is just like a tick too high, I think that's what's up. But otherwise, I'm feeling good.
Oh, no. We're going to channel that energy right into the Kosh.
Bruh.
For real. It's going to be fabulous. Actually, that kind of excites me. I might even try to press some energy buttons here and be like, yeah, let's talk about that.
All right, let's go.
All right. Hey, Billy, can you please share a little something about yourself and your relationship here with the Kosh in the surrounding Fox Cities area?
Yeah, so I'm Billy Korinko. Also, just want to say I'm thrilled to be on the podcast. I'm really grateful for the invitation. I am a lifelong Wisconsinite. However, I did live in Kentucky for a little under a decade. So, yes, but I currently live in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and I run an organization called InnerShift. We do personal and professional development work around leadership, well-being, and diversity and inclusion. And I feel super grateful. I've got an amazing team that I get to work with. But I've, had the majority of my career doing work in higher ed, but really the entirety of my adult life has been spent having conversations with folks around issues related to identity, race, gender, sexuality, et cetera. And so those conversations that often I know can make people's shoulders tighten up are the things that give me juice. So I really love being in those sorts of spaces. And so getting to hear some of your podcasts and knowing a little bit about your work, I'm pumped to be here.
Make no mistake, that is work.
Yes.
People don't understand, that stuff is hard. Those conversations are hard. But there's so much good stuff that comes through that work. I want to know a little bit more about this organization. So how long has the organization been around? And what else do you do? Give me some background, because this seems like a pretty awesome resource, and it seems like something like that some of my listeners, they might need this resource.
Yeah, so the organization has been up and running this past year, and we do a variety of different personal and professional development sort of offerings that are really aimed at trying to move people along in their journey. Thinking about sort of we have our sort of 3 core pillars of leadership, well-being, and diversity and inclusion. And I don't see those as sort of 3 separate tracks or sort of menu offerings. I see those 3 things as being very sort of integrally tied together. And, I don't think you can do good leadership development work if you're not also thinking about well-being. And I don't think you can do good well-being work if you're not thinking about leadership and diversity and inclusion. So we try to do work that's, really connected to all 3 of those conversations simultaneously. We do it through sort of one-on-one coaching, but sort of more broadly, we do a lot of in-house educational work for organizations, private, nonprofit, you name it, primarily here in Wisconsin, but also virtually with folks across the country. And we try to create educational spaces that are tailored for organizations. So often I'll have organizations say like, hey, on our diversity and inclusion journey, we need 101 level stuff. Like that's where we're at. And we're happy to facilitate those conversations. But we also recognize that when we have those conversations with those individuals, they'll often say, I've also got a set of employees who are really tired and frustrated that we're still doing 101 level stuff. Bruh. They want to have a conversation that digs far deeper. And so we do really powerful virtual workshops. And this one program, it's sort of our cornerstone program. It's called the InnerShift Inclusive Leadership Program. It's a 6-month intensive where people are, together in this intimate space for 6 months, really building relationships and thinking about how to sort of grow, scale, and really enrich their diversity and inclusion work. And so we want to do stuff that really digs deep. And so our work is both trying to sort of hit a wide scope of individuals in an organization, but we also want to dig deep. Our sort of, the name InnerShift is intended to sort of evoke the complete antithesis of check the box sort of programming. We want to do work that fundamentally moves people, creates that visceral inner shift where they recognize, you know what, I've got a stake in this conversation. And I'll be honest, as a white guy doing this work, I have a bias right? I have a bias, and that is if I can't articulate why this work is actually beneficial for me, not just on behalf of someone else, but if it actually enriches my life, that to me is the sort of sweet spot that I want to help other folks sort of get to. So yeah, we've got an amazing team of educators. I'll give them some shout out later.
Okay.
But yeah, we've got a really powerful team, and of all the work that we do, the sort of most transformative thing I've seen, and that's really energized me, is I've run a variety of different cohort learning sort of programs in the past, and I can proselytize that sort of framework for learning. I think being in community with people in an intensive way over an extended period of time is really, really rich. And so that program in particular, our inclusive leadership program, is, I think, a really powerful space because people are building deep relationships far beyond just the sort of quick networking you can do at a conference. But when you're in dialogue with someone for half a year to a year, you build real deep relationships.
That's the real difference maker. And I think often, we often don't get that opportunity to be like in a cohort learning situation in DEI.
Yeah, and I think
you're kind of coming in, doing a training, doing a presentation, doing, quick one-offs.
And there's a space and time for that, but I don't think that that's where sort of like deep shift change happens.
I agree. I don't think that's where unless that person's really already in that space, so the rest of the work they're able to do themselves.
Right.
But I don't know if that's how the truly transformative things that a lot of us hope for happen.
And I would also say, I think folks who, in the broadest sense, folks who might consider themselves DEI like practitioners, whether it's formally in their title or not, or they work in HR or you name it in an organization.
Right.
These are often very lonely roles, or can feel lonely, or you feel like you're on an island. And my thinking is, part of why I'm such a firm believer in cohort learning is like it gives you a community, it gives you a support network of folks who are doing this work. And I think there's actually no points whatsoever for doing this work solo. Not doing it in community, I think is silly, particularly when there's other folks who are really wanting to create more inclusive and welcoming workplaces, communities, you name it. And so trying to figure out ways to build a support network. That's why I always say, when I talk to folks about our cohort program in particular, I say this is not like a 6-part webinar series, right? Where you can just sit back and passively consume knowledge. Like, there is stuff that we do from a curricular standpoint that I think is really rich, but the true sort of thing that folks are buying into and getting from the program is a network and a support sort of system where, when you're dealing with difficult conversations or you're not sure how to move your work forward, you've got, 10 other folks who you've built really powerful relationships that you can call in and say, like, hey, can we go grab coffee and dive into this more? Because we already have a deep relationship because we've been in the conversation for a while.
What I'm going to say is some of the best things that I have to be supported in how I do work is I've got these cohort groups of individuals who are also practitioners out there, and we get on a Zoom call like once a month or maybe once every 3 weeks, and we just throw whatever's been happening to us out on the table, and everybody processes it. Or if we're like, hey, somebody asked us to do this, they'll be like, oh, okay, I've already got that stuff. So I was so I was looking into what I like to call colleague work groups, and I brought it to that group, that cohort, and they were just like, oh man, I've got a ton of stuff, and all of a sudden emails just started popping up. Boop, 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 boop. And I was like, oh my God, this was so good. Like, I didn't have to go out there and do all this work. And then while they were sending me this stuff, they were able to explain to me, how they utilized it, how they, this, that, and another, what their experience was with it, responses they've gotten from wherever they are, wherever their organization is or whoever their organization is. And it was so helpful, because you're right. Sometimes the work gets real. It can be lonely. I'm lucky enough that I don't really get that, because I feel really supported by the community, by organizations, by just people overall. I do feel really supported. So I don't tend to feel lonely, but what makes this difficult sometimes is usually you may be the only.
Yeah.
And anytime you're the only, there is a great possibility of becoming lonely.
And I would also just say this work is heavy. It requires us bringing a lot of our personal selves to the work if you're doing it, I think, with integrity. And there's a weight to that. And to not have a support network that you can just be in dialogue with, to me, is unsustainable. And I think so many people in this field in particular, I know so many people who are completely burnt out, right? That's why, for us, well-being is such a critical frame, because if we're not talking about taking care of ourselves and each other, then the work is doomed for failure, in my opinion. And we're on the cusp of an election year. We're already in an election year.
Oh, yeah.
And this
is going to take a lot of self-care.
Absolutely.
This next year is going to be the year of, we're going to have to protect ourselves a little bit, because it's going to be a rough go.
And there's no need to do it solo.
No.
In community, far better.
No, you're right. Absolutely. Okay. Billy, where'd you say you were from?
I'm originally from Waukesha, but live up in Green Bay.
Okay. Waukesha. I can't say I know much about Waukesha.
Sorry.
A little bit about Waukesha.
Okay.
Not a whole lot. Okay. What keeps you in the region?
Yeah, what keeps me here is there's good work to be done. I think there's need, particularly in the sort of DEI space. I think the sort of statistics and notes about the state of Wisconsin and some of its challenges are quite clear, and I want to be in a place where there's good work to be done. And I think there's a community here of people who want our communities, our organizations, our workplaces to be more inclusive and welcoming. But I think for far too long there has been a willing sort of a willingness to not grapple with hard conversations. I think there's that sort of Midwest nice thing here where folks want to avoid hard conversations and just sort of keep things on the superficial, and I think that has a cost. I often joke growing up in Waukesha that, going to school, we never talked about issues of race. My stupid joke is that we had Black History Month Day And, for like an afternoon, we would, watch a video, and that was the entirety of the conversation we'd ever have about race. And I think the sort of lesson I got from those sorts of educational settings as a kid is that, racism is something that happens in the South, not here in Wisconsin. And it also is something that happened a long time ago. And I think that sort of narrative has hurt the state because we've been pushing out this conversation for far too long. And so I'm here because I think there's good work to be done. I also consider this home because this is where my family is. And I feel fortunate to be on a team that is trying to make things better.
I'm going to say I agree with you, and then there's a part of it I don't agree with. And that part would be I think it depends who you are in Wisconsin, whether people are willing to talk to you about it. As a person of color, I find that white people are more than happy to talk to me about a whole lot of stuff I really don't want to talk to them about. And I'll give you, and they're bold. They're bold. In my spaces, they're particularly bold because usually I'm an only.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll give you an example of a situation that just happened to me literally yesterday. And I was out with my man. Big shout out to my man Tarman. We're out. We're having a little something to eat. We're having a beer. And there's this older couple next to me, and, just super nice. So I'm not trying to say they weren't nice. They were super nice, but I forgot what they said to me. And, we figured out, because Oshkosh the Kosh isn't that big. So we figured out we knew a lot of the same people. They were bowlers and stuff like that. Super nice couple, though. But we were talking, we ended up talking about my daughter some kind of way, right? And basically, to make the long story short, because I'm not 100% sure all the context, how we got there, or at least I can't remember it that clearly today, was along the lines, basically they referenced that my daughter wouldn't really be black because she grew up here. And I was like, that's bold.
Yeah.
And yeah, no. So, of course, I had to push back. And I said, well, first of all, we've always taught our daughter that she is both. She's biracial, and she should recognize both, because I'm not big on you have to pick a team thing. I'm big on both parents were in your life, both raised you. You are in touch with both sides of your identity, at least where it comes with race.
Yeah.
All right. There's a lot of other factors, right? Tons of other identities. But nonetheless, so that's how we've always brought her up. And I got that actually from Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods used to, when people would say, like, he was a black golfer and stuff like that, first black this and that, and he would always say, to say that I am only that would be to say that my mother doesn't exist. And I always took it, I thought it was one of the most brilliant responses that I had ever heard. And so I've always, in talking to my daughter and raising my daughter, that was always what I kind of referenced to her, because it is important, that both sides are recognized, and that, and so, okay, this lady says this to me and is referencing this, which just gave me pause. I wasn't really sure why that she decided that she was going to go there.
Right.
But so be it. Right. So then I had to just go back and just clarify to her. And my answer to her was this: since we're both parents are in her life and raised her 100%, she is definitely in touch with both sides very well, regardless of the environment she grew up in. She knows who she is, and she does recognize her identity as a black woman also. And I kind of just left it at that. And, but to go full back to where we started from, I've been in more situations where people are bold enough to say things to me. So I don't buy the Wisconsin Midwest nice thing. I find that when you feel you are in a space where you're comfortable and you think you have leverage, you will say bold things.
No, for sure. And what I also hear from that story is someone who's not had a nuanced conversation about identity, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah. And that, to me, like, I think that's the cost, right? Of, at least that's been my experience, is that I think more often than not, growing up in this state, there haven't been particularly nuanced and rich conversations about identity. I feel like I found my way into those spaces, but I think that's part of, the privilege of whiteness is being able to opt out if you want to.
I'm not even going to call it the privilege of whiteness. I'm going to call it the privilege of majority.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Like, there's a lot of people that, like, their everyday doesn't involve interactions with others that aren't that much different than who they are.
Yeah.
And the backgrounds are similar and such. So, like, it doesn't, and like I said, super nice.
Yeah.
Right? They weren't trying to be offensive.
Right.
It wasn't an attack.
Yep.
It was just ignorance.
Yeah.
And right. And I, luckily enough, I've lived here long enough that I can separate the two.
Yeah.
So we ended up doing shots at the end of it all, and it was awesome. And that's what you do in Wisconsin. I'm just saying. All right. You ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
All right. Let's jump into the first segment because I feel like we went hard there for a minute. All right. First segment is what in the world is going on? And that's where you start with the phrase, what in the world? And then tell us what's on your mind.
Okay. I see some of your Milwaukee Bucks gear in this room right now. And so I got to ask you about Giannis's outburst a couple of weeks ago with the game ball. And I'm curious of what you think of. Well, how many points did he have? Was it 59, something like that?
No, it was 60. It might have been 64, 66.
Franchise record.
67, something like that.
Yeah, what's going on? What do you think of the response?
Oh, no. See, first of all, you got to tell me what you think of the response, and then I'll tell you what I think of the response. But, yeah, no, we starting with you first, Billy. You try to put me on the spot.
I'm torn. I'm torn because if it was me, of course I'd want that game ball. But I also think it was a bit much. And I think the Pacers were being a little bit petty with, taking the ball and whatnot. But, yeah, I don't know. I just it felt like a bit much. Here's what's happening here. You're seeing my sort of bias seep out here because I see your Milwaukee Bucks hat right here. And I shared with you earlier that I'm a huge Miami Heat fan. And so, I'm not seeing this through an unbiased lens, admittedly.
No, that's fair. Here, okay, that's fair. Hey, Jimmy Buckets was here, right?
I know.
Yes.
Visited the Kosh. I love it.
I was at the game.
That's amazing.
Okay. Here's how I feel about it. I agree. Look, you're Giannis, man. And I think the only reason that this even rose to the level of becoming something is because sometimes I think Giannis doesn't always fully understand that he is now the face of the NBA. Right? So, like, not that LeBron isn't still LeBron and such like that, but really, when you think about it right now, who's a bigger face in the NBA than Giannis? And Giannis checks a lot of boxes, right? He's international and he's real humble and family oriented and he checks a lot of good boxes that would fit. So that comes with when you act out of character, or at least what we perceive as out of character, because maybe that very much is character, then there's all this talk about it. Like, personally, who cares?
Yeah.
I don't care if he ran it, but I do think this, like, his team or the handlers should never have let him go handle it. Right? You got to be like, nah, man, look, bro, we got you. We got you. We'll go take care of that.
Yeah.
We got you. We'll take care of that. Now, yes, the Pacers were petty. They knew.
I also feel like because it was a free throw. You know what I mean? The Oscar Tshiebwe's point was a free throw.
Yeah. I'm just saying, it is petty. But I'm not mad about it. I'm not mad about it at all. And so, like, that's it. Like, I just think I'm not mad at Giannis for doing what he did. I'm not mad at the Pacers for doing what they did. But I actually, if you really want to know what I feel about it, I'm really excited about it because this is the kind of stuff that feels like old school rivalry stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And
this feels like some old, maybe Indiana and the Bucks are going to become what used to be Boston and the Lakers. Let these Midwest teams get grimy.
Yeah.
And put some bodies on each other and bring the NBA back to old school greatness. Like, because I do think it's personal now. When your guy did the Dollar Dame watch tap.
That's right.
Like, they ain't gonna score 70 points on you. You do that again. Like, I'm all about this. So if I think something like this actually, because I'm gonna assume they're gonna see each other in the playoffs. Hopefully, I don't know.
It makes for a great storyline.
Yes. Well, no, it not just a great storyline. Skip the story. It actually just makes for nice personal competition.
Yes.
If we don't like each other, good.
Yes.
May the Bucks be like, no, I can't stand the Pacers.
That's right.
We're going to beat the brakes off them.
Yeah.
You know, and may the Pacers be like, no, we're going to shoot your eye out. We can't stand you either. Let it be what it be.
The game ball.
That's right. Let it be what it be. Let it be a little tension between there. Let's friendly, you know, be friendly in the off season. Don't be friendly during season.
I'm with you.
I'm about that life.
Bruh.
All right. I'm sorry. You asked. All right. Let me see here. My what in the world is going on with has to do with what in the world is going on with people at the beginning of the year getting gym memberships that they know they're going to use for 1 month and then they're going to not use it anymore. Now,
Bruh.
I'm going to be honest. I'm one of those people. So I'm not going to pretend like I haven't done this several times. So don't think that I'm actually maybe being as critical as I am being. I would be hypocritical to say that I haven't done this several times myself. I can't tell you how many times that. And here's what I do. Beginning of the year, I was all in my mind, starting usually in October, November. I'm thinking about it. December, I'm like, all right, I'm going to go get a Y membership.
Yeah.
On New Year's Day, because that is the day when they don't charge you the membership extra fee, like the sign up fee, right?
Gotcha.
Because that's like $100 and some bucks. So I'm like, all right, even if I don't go right away, I at least want to say this first $100 I'm gonna sign up for the Y. The Y is good for the family. Y does good things for the community. I'm gonna give some money to the Y, and then I'm gonna go. And if I don't do nothing else, I'm gonna go to the Y and use the sauna.
Yes.
Right? Let me tell you how good that works. Nope. I did it last year and I didn't go at all.
Oh man.
Now, but you know what I'm gonna do this year? I'm still signed up, so I'm gonna still go. But I don't have to re-sign up.
Can you like have this as like a donation? Like you could just consider it like you're donating to a local nonprofit.
Actually, I do consider it like a donation. Yeah. Actually, that's how I justify it.
Yes, exactly.
I justify it by saying I know what the Y does for the greater community and all the other stuff that it does. So me not going, you know, I could be giving my money towards one of these commercials on TV with the really sad looking, whatever the sad looking thing is, or I could just give it to my local Y.
So 2024, you're going to be in the sauna?
Yes.
You're doing it?
Yes.
Okay, I have a question about this.
Yes.
How do you feel about talking in the sauna?
I don't know. I've never been in a sauna.
Really?
No.
Okay, so it's my jam, and I had a tough go at this. So I cannot handle it when people talk in the sauna. Like it is a Zen space. Like to me, it is like meditative. But I heard these people talking about college basketball one day, and I couldn't help it. And I started diving in, and towards the second half of this year, I've become a talker in the sauna. And my resolution for 2024 is I got to step it back a little bit because I think it's a Zen space. I love the sauna, but too many people are talking.
I don't know. Here's the thing. I wouldn't even have known. Now I know that there's sauna etiquette.
There are unwritten rules. I mean, man, yeah. I think they typically at the Y, they have like a bunch of like rules like, you know, don't pour water on the rocks, all this sort of stuff. I feel like there should be a big no talking.
No talking. All right. Well, I'm going to assume that there's no cell phones in the sauna.
Correct.
All right. I guess here's my thing. If I really don't want to be bothered, I'm going to put some headphones in.
Yeah.
Like that.
Whether anything's on or not.
Right. And I'm also going to say, if I run into somebody in the sauna that I know, I almost feel obligated that I'm going to have to talk to them some. If they don't talk to me and they give me the look like we in the sauna, don't holler at me, cool. I'll give them the head nod and we'll keep it, you know, professional. But if they holler at me,
I think there's just some people that treat it like it's their own like podcast studio.
Is that what's going on?
Like, yeah, you're in their show and
you got me scared now. I don't know what to expect out of the sauna.
I'm just advance warning. You got to have a thought as to whether or not you want to be chatting it up in there.
All right. So that is your New Year's resolution.
Yeah, because it's a pet peeve of mine, but I started doing it just because people were talking college basketball, and so I went there because that's a topic I can't help myself but dive into conversation about. But I need it to be a Zen space, and so
do you start running into the same people in the sauna, and just
sure.
so you keep the conversation keeps happening?
Yes.
Oh man,
bruh.
Okay, I'm gonna be ready for it.
It's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing.
Uh-huh.
Okay, well I'm gonna learn now.
Yeah.
All right. The only thing I've heard about the sauna, like, is if you go to the sauna and you run into people like that you don't normally, like, you don't expect to run into, and then sometimes it's awkward because you're in the sauna with, I don't know, maybe like your boss or something. I don't know.
I haven't had that experience.
Okay. I don't know. I've heard that kind of thing from other people. Like, they just don't want to run into certain people in the sauna. I just want to sweat. That's all I'm in it for. All right. Well, okay. We're going to get ready to jump into the next segment. And the next segment is 21 questions. And 21 questions is not 21 questions, but there might be 21 answers because these are really in-depth questions. I get really excited about this because I feel like this is a learning segment where you get to really learn some stuff about how people see the world and maybe even help you frame some things yourself. So, are you ready to kick it off?
Let's do it.
Okay, Billy. All right. First question is, what are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for my friends, family, particularly loved ones who just allow me to show up in my entirety. I, am often someone who's joking around a lot, and I feel like I'm a fairly energetic person. But, when I can authentically be however I'm at that day, whether I'm having a hard day, an amazing day, whatever it is, the people who just allow me to feel comfortable being how I am, that is what I'm most grateful for.
What motivates you?
What motivates me is the realization that I can do things that I used to think were impossible. Like, that is infinitely motivating for me. This past year, I got really intensely back into running, and that has been a really energizing thing for me and motivating to, like, recognize, like, oh, dang, like, when I put my mind to something, I can do something that not too long ago, I would have considered impossible, and that is incredibly motivating for me.
What grounds you?
So I love journaling. Journaling is a practice that I find incredibly grounding. I'll also say that just going for walks, yoga, we were talking about the sauna, like all of those sorts of practices are incredibly grounding for me. It just allows me to clear my mind and just have some pause. And I feel like I need that more and more in my life. And so all of those things I think really ground me.
What does success look like to you?
So my definition of success, I use this term for a while, and it's good tired. And what it means to me is, if you can imagine, let's say you've got a Friday evening and you've had an immensely busy week of doing a ton of good things, like, enriching work, powerful conversations, just, really diving into things, and you feel tired, like you feel physically tired, but it's this good tired of like, dang, I did some good work this week. And whether it is personal stuff for you or actually in your job or in relationships, whatever it is, that sense of good tired to me is success. Just a feeling of I'm really putting in deep effort into the spaces that I show up in my life.
What irritates you?
Okay, what irritates me is when people don't immediately stop what they're doing and read the book or watch the movie that I recommend. I feel like I've got some really great recommendations over here, and like I'll follow up with people and be like, oh, no, I haven't read that yet, or I haven't watched that movie yet. But in all seriousness, I think what honestly irritates me the most is being in conversations. It could be anything, and the entire thrust of the conversation is about why X can't happen. So we could be talking literally about anything, and if it's in a work context or not, if all sort of like roads lead towards no, or this is why this is impossible, I just find that incredibly annoying and frustrating. And I think it's easy to talk about how, like, why something can't happen. Like, that's, obvious. So to me, that's a huge pet peeve, is having conversations that are sort of just a million points of no. I find that incredibly annoying.
What scares you?
I think two things. So, all right, we're going to dive in. I feel afraid of forgetting that this is our only life. Like, this is it. I had a friend who I had coffee with earlier this year, and he told me this story, and he had this line that he said, Billy, there's no dress rehearsal, right? And I didn't totally understand what he meant. And he's like, this is it. Like, we don't get a sort of practice run through of what we're doing here. Like, this is it. And I think there are some times in my life when I'm infinitely more in tune with that than others. I think it oscillates by the day. And I think forgetting that is something that I'm scared of. Like, I'm scared of just not remembering that. Also, I think, just to be blunt, I'm scared of losing people I love. Like, yeah, that always scares me. But I think my thinking around this has evolved some. And I don't know if you've ever seen this interview. This is a few years ago. I highly recommend it. Folks should YouTube it. There was this conversation with Anderson Cooper and Stephen Colbert that every time I watch it, without fail, I'm in tears. And they're both talking about grief and loss. Both of them have had tragic experiences losing loved ones in their lives. And Stephen Colbert's reflections in that interview are so rich because he talks about life is a gift, and with this gift of existence comes suffering. Like, there's no timeline without that. Like, it's a part of the gig. And I think what he reflects on that I find so rich is the idea that the absence of living a life with no grief or no suffering is not just a life full of joy and happiness. It's actually the opposite of a life with no grief or suffering is a life with no emotion. And that I find infinitely depressing and wholly not the sort of life that I want to live. And so even though, to get back to what I said scares me, like losing people that I love, I think about that interview because I think what Stephen Colbert was trying to move Anderson Cooper towards is this idea of when you feel pain or suffering or grief, it's because you have something really special. Like, you don't experience grief or suffering over things that you don't care about. And so living a life that you don't have things that you care deeply about, I find depressing and sad. And so it still scares me, but on my better days, I try to think in that sort of frame of it's a gift to have powerful relationships or have people in your life that mean a lot to you, that the thought of losing them is heartbreaking.
I think we can put that link in the podcast notes to that conversation.
That's beautiful.
All right. What recharges your soul?
So without question, laughing and having fun. For the longest time in my life, I had not been sort of familiar to the language of social health. But I think the idea of actually having fun and laughing and joy is I think a critical component of health. And so I think for me, I find so much, I feel fully recharged when I'm laughing and having a good time. And I'm someone who in the span of 5 minutes could be, crying and laughing. And that to me is how I want to be. But yeah, when I am laughing and, having fun with someone who I, care about, that to me is the best. And that always, recharges me and fills my cup.
All right. Last one. Tough one. How do you define love?
So my definition of love is very much inspired by Bell Hooks, the famous author. And she always talks about it as love's a verb. We think about it often as a noun or a feeling, but it's an action. And, if we want to get more granular, I think love can show up in a variety of different ways, but at its core, it's about doing things that nourishes someone else's soul. And I think that act, however you try to do that, to me is how I would define love.
I like that. I like that a lot. Okay. You survived 21 questions.
Nice.
Ready for the next segment?
Let's do it.
Next segment is called Word Association. This is where I say a word and you tell us what's on your mind. We always start off with the greatest word, the unifying word, the word that bonds us all together and makes the world right. And that word is food.
Okay. I love food. I could share 1,000,001 things, but I got to tell you, and folks who know me have heard me talk about this place for a long time. Have you ever been to Ann Arbor, Michigan?
Nope.
Okay, so you got to go.
All right, I'm with
When you go to Ann Arbor, you got to go to this Jewish deli, and it's called Zingerman's. It's been around for 41 years, and they, I think, have such a rich, deep appreciation for food and community in terms of like the entire ethos of how do they do their stuff. And if you go there, like you could get a Reuben sandwich, and I'll be honest, like I do not care for Reuben sandwiches. I don't think they're good, but I went there and ate it, and it was the bomb, and it was like the best sandwich I ever had. And a sandwich alone will cost you like $20 probably, and like that's not with a drink or chips or anything like that.
Just a
sandwich, and it's gigantic. But their whole sort of framework is, if you want a sandwich that is made by someone who is treated well, paid ethically, is in a good workplace, made with ingredients that are either local or sourced from around the world, like really, really good stuff, it won't cost $4.99. Like it can't. And for me, they have really sort of shaped a lot of my thinking around food. I think they're one of their co-founders, Ari Weinswig, who is this brilliant author. His books have changed my life in many ways. He has given me a deeper appreciation for food, and also the sort of value of like eating well, like eating good stuff. And I can't recommend it enough. It's an institution in Ann Arbor, and they just do brilliant stuff there.
I agree with that. On so many levels. Like, it's not always affordable, right?
Yep.
Sometimes we gotta break out the ramens,
right?
But when it's time to eat well, let's eat well.
They have this at their deli. They've got like a little gourmet foods section of their deli. And there's this, it's called, I think, pistachiosa. It's this pistachio spread that is like, melt your face off good. It's like one of the most delicious things I've ever eaten. And you can go there and you can sample anything you want. They'll just open it up right there for you, and you can try all these amazing foods. And one of the things I think I appreciate most about them is, so they have this training organization that they do professional development work. I've done a lot of work with them, and it is mind-blowing stuff. But they even, think about mindfulness and food. So like tasting something and really being present with what you're eating, not just having it be just sort of like shove it in your mouth and then just going on with your day, but like really sort of sitting and appreciating something. I can't recommend them enough. They've just radically shifted my thinking about food.
I'm with it. And not only that, I also think the thing with food is I think sometimes we buy too much, right? And like we're always expecting, like I would spend $20 in a sandwich in a heartbeat if it's a bomb sandwich.
Yes.
That's it. And like I don't need a ton of other stuff because like I'm not even hungry like that anymore. Like, give me this bomb sandwich. I don't need the 42 other sides and whatnot. This is good quality, and I think it's fair. Like, sometimes I think we as Americans focus on quantity
100%
when it comes to food over quality, when often we actually don't eat, or we don't need to eat as much as we think we need to eat.
Okay, I got to give another recommendation, and that is also in Ann Arbor. They've got a bunch of different restaurants, but they've got this place called the Roadhouse, and they have categorically the most amazing mac and cheese I've ever eaten in my entire life. Like, it is just fundamentally categorically different. Like, it is unbelievable, and I can't recommend it enough.
Ooh, I'm going to tell you right now, the aunties and the ancestors' hair just stood up on their neck. They like, who? What?
Look.
What are you talking about?
I'm just telling you, it's really, really good. And I'll also say, so they make pimento cheese, and I would say the Midwest is not known for its like famous pimento cheese.
Right.
But they have, I think, like the world's greatest pimento cheese and it's being made in Michigan.
All right. Well, look.
Got to make a trip.
Look, I'm with it. Well, you gonna take me on a trip.
Let's do it.
This is how, look, I'm that person, you know how there's people that you have professionally in your life, and when you bring up an idea and they're like, all of a sudden that's you got a new assignment to do. They're like, oh, that sounds fabulous. Here you go. You need to make that happen. Right.
All right.
I'm that dude. I'm the dude that if you bring it up on the show and you're like, you need to, We need to go now.
Okay, so we're doing part
Road
2 of
trip.
the conversation in Ann Arbor.
That's right. Road trip. Okay. All right. Next words. Cocktail or beer?
That's such a Wisconsin question. And I say that because you're making me think about, so I mentioned earlier that I lived in Kentucky for, I think it was 8 years. And it's interesting that Kentucky has such a, I think, a complex relationship with alcohol because it's like through and through bourbon country, but also all throughout Kentucky, there are like dry counties.
Everywhere.
And I forgot about that. And for a year, I lived in Berea, Kentucky. And I had just finished like unpacking a bunch of boxes. I was moving in and I was like, dang, I am tired. I want to go get a beer. And I went to the grocery store and I couldn't find the beer section. And then I was like, okay, that's weird. They must just not sell it at this grocery store. So I went to the gas station and also didn't find beer. And then it dawned on me that I was in a dry county. And so it's just interesting being back in Wisconsin the past number of years. Like we've got a very different culture around alcohol. But my answer to your question is for sure beer, but I'm going to put in a vote for NA beer. Like I am not like full non-alcoholic. However, we are living in the golden age of non-alcoholic beer. And it is like one of the like biggest sectors in like the sort of alcohol sort of like field. And like, it's a whole thing.
Is it?
It's yes.
Okay.
Like there's so many amazing options right now. And start looking at them, like when you go out somewhere, like look at the menu and you're not just going to see like O'Doul's or whatever. Like there's 1,000,001 amazing options and it's a whole thing.
Oh, well, first of all, I don't never even look at the beer menu of anything.
Okay.
That's just not who I am. But I understand it. I find people in in Wisconsin, when people bring up NA beer, there's this look on their face that's like they're trying to be respectful. But they're looking at you like, man, what in the hell? I'm just saying. That's what I feel like when I see people that are like, hey, can I get it? And then you just see people like, have you ever been somewhere and you ask for an NA beer and then you see people that from other places, like other booths and stuff, kind of peek over and be like, who is this?
I don't think I get that, but I have a group chat with a bunch of friends and NA beer is a topic of, much conversation.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, some people are judgmental, but for real, like it's a whole thing like right now that's like taking off majorly. And like even at the grocery store, if you start looking, like the number of options in that space has like exploded in the past couple of years.
Okay. I don't think, and when I say that, I don't mean like they're frowning upon you like it's a bad thing you're doing it, but they're questioning it.
Totally.
Like, are they okay? or do they got?
Is this some cry for help?
Right. Is this a cry for help? Is something going on? Just like I do feel like there's just a number of things that go through. Maybe it's just me, but like I've looked around when people ask.
So you're the person giving the look, is what you're saying?
Oh no, I can keep a straight face.
Okay.
Like it don't
I'm feeling
matter.
judgment right now.
This is maybe I don't even know what my facial expression is. Maybe I'm judging you right now. No, I don't have no problems. Like I'm a firm believer. If I actually think a great business idea would be a non-alcoholic bar,
100%.
period. So like you could go meet people from work at lunch and have a couple of non-alcoholic cocktails and go back to work. And it wouldn't be that. And I'm about the yummy. Make it yummy.
Yeah.
I'm with it. I actually think there's a model for that would do really, really well for people who, or the place you might want to stop directly after work before you go home to your family. And then you haven't had, you can still go home and do the things you got to do because you didn't tear it down like that.
And for me, like, again, I'll also have like a real beer every once in a while. But for me, part of what it is it's like just a ritual thing. Like if the point is to hang out with someone and have a drink,
yeah,
you can still accomplish that.
Facts.
It's just a little bit different.
Agreed. Yeah, well, it's not wrong. Just might not be Wisconsin. No. Just play with you. Bruh. Okay. Shop local.
Okay, I got to give a shout out to Whisky Business in Appleton. Yeah, if you're in the market for, if you're not getting your baked goods from Whisky Business, I don't know what to tell you. Erica, who she's got just amazing talent, and I have ordered a number of things over from her from the past couple of years, and everything she does is incredible. And so I want to give a shout out to an amazing person doing cool baked good stuff in the Valley.
Do you bake?
I baked a coffee cake 2 weeks ago, and it was amazing.
You're really proud about this.
I'm super proud.
I can tell.
Yeah.
He's got the big. Look, the minute I asked him, he was like,
for sure.
let me tell you about this coffee cake.
Yeah, it was incredible, and I've actually got one in my car. If you want a slice,
Yeah.
When we're done, we'll wrap and eat some coffee cake.
We just discussed this, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, you brought it up now.
Yeah,
yeah, I want a piece.
I will say my baguette game needs some work. I tried making baguette a couple weeks ago, and it's really complicated. And so, yeah, I'm aspiring, and I'm not an aspiring baker, but
I think there's some, like, I'm not gonna lie, like I used to, and this was a long time ago, way back in the day. I get baking. Like, there's something soothing about it.
yes,
It's like anything, like something where you can make something with your own hands, and then you come out, and then I think the greatest reward is when you make something edible and it actually tastes really good. And then you get to eat it, and then you get to share it with somebody. And like I do what happens, what I will say, in many proud Black households with grandmom, and where she gonna cook something. She knows it is wonderful and it is the greatest thing on the planet, and she's gonna sit back, watch you eat it, and then after you take that bite, she's gonna say, "How is that there? How is that? How's that taste?" Some version of that.
yeah.
And then she already know. She knows she done baked the baddest thing in the planet, or made the greatest thing that has ever been created in that kitchen.
No, it's super satisfying, but I need some more reps in this space.
Okay.
You'll notice I didn't offer you a baguette because
You came out clean and just said the baguette game ain't there yet.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. I like that. Streaming.
Okay, I got to give a recommendation to this show. It's called Wrestlers on Netflix. It's about Ohio Valley wrestling, and it came out earlier this year, and I just think it's super rich. It's about sort of like small market professional wrestling in Kentucky, and I think it is a brilliant sort of analysis of masculinity and class, and it's just, I think, a really powerful sort of series. I think it's maybe 7 episodes. Stick through the first couple, but the whole arc of the series, I think, is really powerful. I'm hoping, crossing my fingers, that they make a second season.
Concert.
Okay, my dream concert, I would love to see, and this is going to be complicated, but I would love to see Miley Cyrus in concert. I think she's the bomb, but she's like not touring right now, like at all. Like, I think she's done, like maybe not going to tour ever. So I might be waiting for a while for this, but I think the dream would be Miley Cyrus and Dolly Parton. And then I'm also going to throw Stevie Nicks into the mix. I think that concert would be incredible, in large part because, when I was in high school, I went to a Fleetwood Mac concert, and I like did not know what that was. And I was like, all right, this is going to be dumb, but I actually had a really great time. So, but Miley Cyrus, I think she's got an incredible voice.
I could get down with that. Actually, I think she's highly underestimated.
100%.
I find her to be like a compelling entertainer.
Absolutely.
Like, and authentic. She feels very authentic. Like, Miley just does what Miley does. Like, you can't really get mad at her for it.
Yeah, and she's she's had so many different like genre. Like I think she's got incredible range, and I think her voice is incredible.
Okay. I actually like that. And yeah, look, Dolly gets love. Like, Dolly's just one of the greatest people walking the planet. You can't get, man, I'm with you. I just think that would be a fire concert. Never thought about that one. Community.
When you say community, I think about team. I think about the folks who I get to work and, on an everyday basis with, but also just sort of peripherally. I feel really, really grateful, since moving back to Wisconsin, to get to work with a ton of really, really amazing people who want to have powerful conversations and move the diversity, equity, inclusion sort of field in a powerful direction. And when I think about community, I think about the people that I lean on for support every day and get to do really cool work with.
Okay. Next segment. Next segment is called the Kosh Hidden Gems. This is your opportunity to share with the Kosh listeners a hidden gem. Does not have to be an Oshkosh. Can be anywhere. But a hidden gem where maybe it's something everybody knows about, but maybe they don't know some particular details about it, or maybe it's something that you don't think a lot of people know about. What hidden gem do you have for us, Billy?
Okay, I'm wholly unqualified to answer this question. And I will say, listening to the Kosh, I feel like I'm learning more and more about the sort of area. So I feel like I'm a learner in this space. The extent of my sort of time really in Oshkosh is stopping on my drive from Green Bay to Milwaukee. And so my hidden gem is the clearance corner of the Nike outlet store. I wanted to choose something really sort of mom and pop and local. But I would say the vast majority of my shoes I purchase are from here in Oshkosh. I don't have a better recommendation than that, but shout out to that corner of that store.
I think that's a hidden gem. I think that qualifies.
Okay.
A, because no one's ever brought it up before. B, I didn't know about it. And I like to think that I'd like to know a lot of hidden gems. I did not know about
See, now I'm regretting bringing it up because maybe I've been cleaning up because nobody else is touching that corner.
Yeah, man. Now you done lost your chance. You done lost your chance at some of those deals you was really getting in on. You're done now, man.
It's the back right corner. I'm telling you, they've got
done
lots of stuff.
Don't let them have Air Force Ones. It's done.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right. I love it. Okay. Well, at this time, I think we're going to take a little brief commercial break.
Did you know there are children in the Fox Valley in need of hearing aids, but their parents struggle to provide them because of lack of insurance or high copays? I am Juliette Sturkins, audiologist and board member of Here in the Fox Cities, and proud that this small local nonprofit organization has helped fund hearing aids for some 30 kids. Your donation would help more children hear. Visit hereinthefoxcities.org to learn more and to see their smiles. Every child deserves to hear.
All right. Let me just put this out there. Once again, if you are a nonprofit out there and listening to the Kosh and you would like a commercial, please feel free. Reach out to me at askthekosh@gmail.com and we can record a commercial and you can have it for free. Yeah, because, we gotta pub our nonprofits in the community that are doing great work out there and supporting our local community. Now, on to the segment that I have fallen in love with. This is my favorite segment of the Kosh, and that is story time. That is an opportunity for our guests to share a story with the Kosh listeners. What do you have for us, Billy? What's the story?
So I want to tell you a story about a experience I had earlier this year. I gave a talk, and I, like I sort of alluded to earlier, give lots of talks about, sort of the multiple areas of sort of leadership, well-being, and diversity inclusion. And so I was given a particular talk about sort of like my own entry point into diversity, equity, inclusion work. And I had an experience after that talk where this woman came up to me and she was just completely in tears. And I was a little bit surprised by that because even though I sort of like hit some sort of deep parts of that conversation in that talk, it wasn't a talk that I imagined would sort of elicit that sort of response. And this woman, I could tell she was almost kind of breaking out in hives. She was really, just kind of going through some stuff. And she was talking about how just hard things have been at work for her lately, in part because she was feeling, I think, really anxious around the sort of prospect of having any conversation with anyone that she works with around trans issues. And so she shared with me that she had this experience at work where there was some sort of activity in the workplace where people were given a prompt of, if I'm remembering correctly, it was something along the lines of all the employees were supposed to bring in a sort of throwback retro picture of their family from like 10 years ago. And so it was this sort of team building exercise that I think was imagined as being sort of fun, totally innocuous, but she was feeling so much anxiety around this because she recognized that by bringing in a picture of her family from 10 years ago, it would demand some questions from some people because her son, would not look the same way that people, know him to be in, the photos on her desk. And So she was just feeling majorly anxious about this. And she had heard people making sort of like passing snide remarks about trans issues in the workplace. And so even though she's not trans, she's just feeling, I think, the weight of this in this moment. And it just got me thinking about how I feel like I see so many organizations who say there are certain conversations we never need to have. We don't need to talk about LGBT issues or, let's say, specifically trans issues in our workplace because, well, no one who works here is trans. But seeing, I think, the weight of that situation on her, all I could think about is there's no universe where she is doing her best work. Like, she has some significant weight that she's just grappling with of not feeling comfortable talking about things in her workplace because of comments that she's heard. And the sort of triggering event was something that, again, I don't think is malicious at all. Like, it was just a sort of fun team building sort of exercise, but had an impact on her that really made showing up to work difficult. And so I think about that a lot in this sort of whole space of diversity, equity, inclusion work. I think a lot of people just see it as like, well, there's a cost to this in terms of, we don't want to have heavy conversations, but I am a firm believer that there's a cost to not having those conversations. And the cost is if you've got members of your team, like this woman who is grappling with really heavy things and doesn't feel comfortable showing up at work, she's getting her paycheck no matter what, but she's not bringing her best self to work. And one of the things I think a lot about is, being a huge, huge college basketball fan, one of the things I always sort of like pay attention to is invariably in like the first or second week of March, there's always an article, usually like 10 different news outlets will write that same version of the sort of similar article. And that is, in the past 2 days, during the first 2 days of March Madness, American businesses have lost however many millions or billions of dollars because people are just chilling out watching their favorite college basketball team on their phone and not working. And I think the cost of disengagement of people who are tuned out or not comfortable or going through hard stuff and don't feel like they can show up as their sort of full selves at work has an infinitely greater cost to American businesses than me watching my Kentucky Wildcats for 2 hours on a random Thursday in March. And I think that's easy to sort of quantify in like the sort of disengagement over a 2-day period where people are glued to watching college basketball. But the sort of compounded effect of people going to work, not feeling like they can actually be in dialogue or talk with other people about stuff they've got going on in their lives, I think has a tremendous cost. And being in that conversation made me recognize some of the people are going through stuff. And I think there's a cost to not having these sorts of conversations. And I could just see it viscerally in her face. And she just, I think, felt a relief of being in any sort of space where she could speak truth to some of the complexities of things that she was dealing with in her life.
Let me ask you a question, because I've run into this before. What do you do in those situations where, and I'm bringing this up because I think it's something that happened. And so I want to frame it in a way so if there's listeners out there, maybe it's something you can take away. Maybe there's something I can take away and I can also learn from it because, once again, when you work in these spaces, the professionals do not have all the answers. We are learning every day with everyone else.
That's right.
We are trying to figure this out with everyone else and try to understand. So when organizations or your job has these kinds of things, and one of them I'm thinking of right now is like the thing where you have to bring in a picture from your childhood. Yeah. And now, bring in a picture that's more recent, and we're going to try to match the pictures with whoever. How do you navigate that? Are those things okay to do? Should we, and I have a response to it, but I want to hear your thought process on things of that sort, because it's harmless enough. It's actually a team building, rapport building thing done by, usually if there's a sunshine club kind of thing going on at your job where, and it's just a fun activity that people like to try to do. But for what you just mentioned, there's a lot of places where that could falter. Or I'll even give you my situation. I've ran into situations like that, and I won't participate in them. Why? Because I'm the only.
Yeah.
So why am I going to give them the picture of me as young Timber when I'm the only Black person in my organization, whatever organization I'm speaking about at that time? And so that takes the whole fun out of the game.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
There's no guessing.
Yes.
I'm sorry. And, I've not had the privilege of things where I get to manipulate this beautiful tan of mine. It's just stuck with me. So
no, but to answer your question about like, well, can we do stuff like that? I think that's where I think a lot of people go. It's like, well, okay, gosh, I feel exhausted. Like this is one, like I had no bad intention. This is just something I was trying to do to like, build a, fun team environment. And now I can't do this. And I think people want to shut down when they feel like, man, I feel like I'm walking in this sort of, there's landmines of things that I'm always making a mistake. And my feeling is, I think so many people in the sort of DEI space correctly sort of remind us that we have to think about our impact, not our intent, right? And so it's about thinking about what's the, what impact are you actually having as opposed to just, squarely focusing on your intent. But I think beyond that, I think there is a defensiveness that comes up when, like you have a situation that was, you might have seen as innocuous or harmless or not, there's no malintent whatsoever. And people give you sort of pushback. I understand when people might feel like, dang, I'm just trying to build a more fun environment in my workplace. I didn't mean anything, offensive by this whatsoever. My thinking is like, that's a really sweet spot to do some learning and just pause with like, man, why am I feeling sort of tight about this? And how can I be in dialogue with someone in a way to better understand their perspective? I think there's actually a really rich opportunity to get to know the people that you spend the majority of your day or life with, the people that you work with. I think there's a really rich opportunity there. But man, like it's a critical sort of juncture, fault line, whatever you want to call it, of being at that spot where somebody says, I want to tell you how this landed or how I experienced this. And if your default is to get defensive and shut down, I think that's just something to sort of pause with. I can't think of any moment in my life when I've gotten super defensive or shut down when I'm right or when I'm well, like very rarely. Like, I just don't think that's how we operate when we're at our best. I think when people want to give us loving feedback, and it might show up in a variety of different ways, like the goal is to try to show it better for other people. And so I don't think there's a sort of blanket rule of like, well, we can never do this, because I'm an imperfect practitioner. I'm in a learning process. I've been in this space for a really long time, but I'm still figuring things out. Like the goal is not to aim for perfection because you're doomed to fail. It's about trying to figure out how you can show up and create environments that work better for other people. And you're guaranteed to screw things up. Like you're guaranteed to. And so it's not about getting comfortable with that. Like you just don't care anymore. But just recognizing, like, I'm not batting 1,000. I'm never going to bat 1,000. I'm showing up imperfectly to this podcast, and I'm going to show up to stuff imperfectly tomorrow. And for every day for the rest of my life, I'm going to show up imperfectly, and that's okay. And it doesn't give me a pass to make mistakes, but it just means that, like, if we can have a growth mindset in this space of trying to just be better, that's where it's at, in my opinion. And I think a lot of people just, want like, well, just tell me exactly what I can do and not do, or say or not say. And I think that's missing the whole conversation in many ways.
Fair. That's what I'm going to say. There's a lot of it I agree with, and there's parts of it. Yeah, no, I really agree with it overall, but I'm going to let them do it.
Let them do what?
We're going to, the thing, if you want the pictures and people bring it in, what I think is more important to me, because I don't want to say don't do it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not the answer. What I would ask organizations to make sure that they have in place are safe places, safe people for people to bring their concerns, their feelings to.
Yes.
And as long as those exist,
100%,
that's where the win is. Because the conversation will happen, and we'll understand who these individuals are, what their concerns are, validate them, and then support them. And I think that's where breakdown happens, is when you don't have the safe space or the safe individuals in place for that person, like you were mentioning, to be able to come to and have that conversation. I think just being able to, a person to come and say, hey, this is why this doesn't work for me.
And if you don't have those conversations happening, it's probably not because anything's happening. It's because people don't trust to come to you to have that conversation.
That's exactly it.
And even though, like, I know it's sort of cliche or easy to say, like, oh, feedback is a gift and all that sort of stuff. But if people can't come to you and say, like, Timber, I want to let you know how what you said a minute ago actually landed for me. If I didn't feel comfortable to, like, lovingly provide you feedback on things that, let's say, didn't square with me or bother me or whatever it may be, it would be because either I don't trust you or because I think you're a lost cause. If I was like, you know what, I could tell Timber that he said X, Y, or Z, but it's going to be a waste of my breath because he's never going to learn. He's never going to change. Actually, by having an honest conversation about those sorts of things, it's a deep compliment. And the compliment, and again, I'm an imperfect practitioner of this, but the deep compliment is, I trust you and I believe that you actually didn't want to cause harm. I believe that you actually don't want to create a hostile work environment or whatever it may be. I believe that you're a good person and that you have good intent, and I still trust you enough, and I believe in your potential enough to say, hey, let's talk about this. And my thinking is, and I think this is where I think sort of work in this DEI space can not be productive if that feedback is ever given with like a twinkle in one's eye. Like, I am proud to, like, call you out on this thing that you just did as if I'm batting 1,000 and I'm perfect. Trust breaks down then, because there's no mutual relationship then, because if I'm talking to you in such a way as if I'm saying, Timber, I've never screwed up, I've never done anything, wrong or whatever, you're going to call BS on me and just say, like, that can't be. And it's coming from this sort of moral high ground space that isn't actually about growth. It's about, me showing you up or something like that.
Thank you. Thank you for that story. That was fabulous.
Thanks.
All right. So it's that time, Kosh listeners. Every single time it just makes me happy, and it means that it is now time for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week is the topic chosen by our guests 99.9% of the time, and this week is no different. So, Billy, what do you got for our Topic of the Week?
Man, obviously this is a topic of much discussion in our state right now, but I want to talk about, let's talk about the state of DEIB work at the end of 2023. Let's do it.
All right, let's go.
So I'm curious, I want to kick off asking you a question. What do you think is the sort of state of the field right now as you look forward to 2024? Where do you think the field is at? And, what comes to mind for you in terms of where I think particularly our state is at?
I'm going to be honest. I don't do that. I don't do the state thing. I'm not worried about the state. Since I'm a practitioner and I have kind of my territory that I have to follow and be concerned about, I worry about Appleton, Wisconsin. That's it.
Yep.
I get what's going on, and of course you've got to keep up with it, and of course I've got friends who are in the space and professionally doing it, and right now look, in the bigger space of it all, I don't know how I want to put this. The boogeymen that have been put in place concerning DEI in the state of Wisconsin is just not real. Right? And what I mean by that is real is there's been this false villainization of it put in place for political and power reasons. It's not because it's actually not done harm or that it doesn't have a great business argument to actually say why we need to do this, or that the demographic shifts in the state don't also justify every reason why you want to be having these conversations, you want to be having these educational opportunities, you want to be having a diversified workforce. We know every reason why you should, but the reasons why you should not aren't for any good justifiable reasons other than the manipulation of people who are in power to create a villain so they can say, you're on my team. We need to not let them win. They're bad. Stick over here. Vote my way. That's it. Like, none of the other part of it, like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So, like, I don't really...
Do you think it's grounded in fear?
Absolutely, it's grounded in fear. Because here's the thing. Most of the definitions that people are fearing aren't even the real definitions of the things that they're fearing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a false... It's everything about it is false, as far as I'm concerned. As far as the negative connotations and the reasons, the why not, and this, that, and another, it's absolutely, it's ground and it's somewhere between fear and just, well, no, just fear, because difference. When there's people who do well with difference and new things come along and they embrace, and then there's those people who find change really, really hard, or things that are outside their norm, or they're scared of having to admit their ignorance.
All right. Can I tell you a theory I have?
Yeah.
I want to tell you a theory I have specifically with, and I'm thinking about white men and the sort of like a moment that or a sort of thing that I see happen quite a bit. And that is, even when the sort of like phrase diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI, or whatever we're calling it, is sort of spoken, there's a face that's made, like a sort of like wincing. And I've been thinking about that response. Again, for me as a white guy, I've been thinking about when I see that happen, and I've been trying to like put it under a microscope and dissect it. And I'm specifically thinking about instances when I see white men do that, because I have that experience. I'll be honest, when I talk about, you know, the organization I run, InnerShift, and I talk to say, you know, hey, we do personal and professional development around leadership. People are cool. Well-being, people are cool. And then when I say that third pillar, diversity and inclusion, sometimes I'll get a look. And I've been trying to like dissect, like, okay, what's going on there? And I certainly think there are some people who get sort of pleasure out of like pushing back to DEI sort of initiatives because it sort of puffs them up and gives them a sort of feeling of power or whatever it may be. But when I see that wince, I just think like that's a pain response. Right? Like if I'm talking to you right now and if I say something and I see you like really sort of like tighten up your shoulders and wince, like I hit some sort of button there and it's a pain response. And so I'm trying to think like, okay, what's the pain response? Particularly if like, you know, part of, I think the sort of premise of thinking about, you know, diversity and equity inclusion is we're also analyzing power. And so how is it that at least insofar as these two categories of race and gender, you know, this white guy that I'm talking to, you know, in sort of theory checks the box for having this sort of social capital power, whatever we want to call it. What's to explain the sort of pain? And I think part of what it is, here's my sort of working theory. And that is, I think we're in part trapped in our language, particularly around the word privilege. I think when people hear that word, they equate it with like silver spoon. So if I, you know, say to someone, you know, oh, here's how, you know, privilege might show up in your life, whatever, they hear that as I'm telling them their life has been easy. And I think specifically for white men, I think there's a sort of visceral reaction to that, because I think one of the sort of dominant expectations of masculinity is like suppressing your emotions, suppressing the feelings that you're having in your life, pain, suffering, whatever it may be. You got to like bottle that up, be tough, all that sort of stuff. And so they've, you know, I'll be talking to a guy who's had a lifetime of that, a lifetime of practice of, I'm not going to be in touch with my emotions. I'm going to push my stuff down. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to try to be a provider, whatever it may be. I'm going to play this role that has been thrust in front of me my entire life. And when I've got hard stuff, I can't talk about it or I can't process it. And so in comes a educational program that says, I want to tell you how you have privilege. And they hear that as, I want to tell you why you've had your life easy. And I think that hearing that for a lot of people, for a lot of white men, is like being asked to, the pain and the hard stuff that you've dealt with in your life, push it a little bit deeper. Don't actually acknowledge it. When I think the sad thing is, I think the sort of best, richest version of diversity, equity, inclusion would be a space where that white guy could actually come into tune with like, I want to actually interrogate how some dominant narratives of masculinity in my own identity haven't been particularly well serving me. And I don't think that happens nearly enough, but I think that's what the sort of response is that it's this sort of knee-jerk reaction to hearing that word privilege, defining it as my life has been easy and feeling like, man, that does not square with me at all. And I think that's what trips up a lot of people. What do you think?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I think privilege is a hard word to process.
Yeah.
I think anytime you take one word and people define it in all the different ways that they define it, and it takes on this life of its own, kind of like diversity.
Yes.
Diversity is taking on its own. That's another wince word.
Yes.
You say it, and people are like, ugh. And what I feel people feel when they hear it is like, now I've got to change the way I'm doing things because of these other people. And that's not necessarily it, right? That's not it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm quick to say, to me, I just take diversity as a measurement of difference.
Right.
It's just a word that describes when there's different things. Like I always use the example of, if you've got a bowl of jelly beans, that's a diverse bowl of jelly beans. Right? Unless you just buy the black ones, and then you're just one of those weird people.
That's right.
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother topic, though.
Totally.
That might be what in the world is going on with people in black jelly bean bowls. But nonetheless, I feel where you're coming from with that.
Yeah, I think it's when people hear that word privilege, I think they hear it as your life has been easy. And I'm a firm believer that like, yeah, I have a ton of privilege in, my ability to sort of move and navigate the world and all of that. But having a ton of privilege does also not mean that like you might still be dealing with really hard stuff in your life. Those two things are not mutually exclusive.
Right.
But I think that there's a sort of fear to even engage in the conversation. And my belief, I have a deep bias in this work, and that is particularly for folks who are in sort of any, whatever we want to call it, sort of dominant group status. If you can articulate why you have a vested interest in this work, not just on behalf of so-and-so in your community or so-and-so in your workplace, but you specifically, then I think your engagement in the conversation will always be superficial. It'll always be just sort of like at the sort of thinnest layer possible. And my thinking is, I think there's a space for the guy who has lived his entire life following this sort of dominant script of masculinity that says, don't process your emotions, to say, actually, I want to rethink some of the dominant ways that I've been sort of taught about identity as well, because I might benefit from that conversation as well. And in the process, and in doing that, I might also be able to deepen my well of empathy to understand about how certain aspects of my identity have also afforded me privilege in ways that I've got people in my life who haven't experienced that. And I can do both of those things at the same time.
Fair. I just think some people aren't there. And we got to meet people where they're at in that learning curve.
100%.
And like, the privilege thing is hard, and you're right, there is a wince.
Yeah.
Sometimes when that word is used, because I think it feels like a discrediting of all of their experience
Or hard work or whatever.
Yeah, right. Whatever it is. Right. So I get that part.
I don't know a single human being who would say, man, my life has just been so perfectly easy. Now, whether or not you and I might think that, like, I don't know anyone who would identify it like that as saying like, man, my life has just been perfect.
But I also think there's a part of it where there is a part where how do I want to put this? They don't want to be guilted because there is an acknowledgement that they know
Absolutely.
that others do have it different.
Yes.
And that there's more challenges, because I always say, would you be willing to trade spaces with them?
Yep.
And I've yet to find the person that says yes.
Yep.
Yes, I would. And because of that, like I'm a firm believer, like, people aren't ignorant.
Yes.
Like, they know what they see.
Yep.
They know very good well what something is and what exists out here. And they may not outwardly want to come and say, yeah, I see bias. I see prejudice. I see racism. I see, right? but instead is going to what I find where people usually go is they go to a defensive stance on why they're not.
Yeah.
Not that it doesn't exist. Or they go to a defensive stance of, well, if it would just go back to the way it was.
So like a mythic view of the past sort of a thing?
Yeah, well, the past always seems better, right?
Yeah.
But, so I don't know. There's a lot there in what you have brought up.
Thanks.
Yeah. Anything else?
I think I want to just share that I think, again, I've got a bias, a sort of orientation with this work that I may be stubborn on, but I also think that to do this work well, we've got to do our own stuff, meaning like do some internal work. And I think it is so easy, particularly in these sorts of conversations, to look externally being like, man, I want to sort of complain about so-and-so or this person or this organization or whatever it may be. And I think it's a very sort of convenient way to not grapple with your own stuff. And I think for me, the conversations that I'm most interested in are when people show up and say, you know what, I want to get to a space where I'm comfortable, maybe being open to rethinking how I've done things. And that is a challenging space. But I would also say that's one of the things that I most admire in other people, that when I see someone who's willing to rethink things or imagine a different way of being, that's an incredibly confident way of being, in my opinion, because just sort of sticking to your guns and just saying like, well, I can never change or I can never do things differently, I think reveals a level of insecurity that I say this a lot, that I'm an imperfect practitioner in this space. Like I show up imperfectly. I am trying to do better. I'm still working through my own stuff. Because I always will be. Like, there's no finish line with this work in the sense of like, oh man, I'm a finished product. I've unlearned, my entire life worth of socialization. Like, no, that's not how this works. And so to be in dialogue with people who are saying, you know what, I want to learn and understand better. And, going back to I think what some people might see as sort of innocuous sort of example of the story I shared earlier about the bring a, family photo to work thing. If you can get to a place where you can say, you know what, yeah, I didn't mean it, anything malintent there whatsoever, but I care more about helping other people feel comfortable and creating a workplace or community or whatever it may be where people feel like they can show up and be well. If that's more important to you than just feeling like you've always got it right. And I think for a lot of leaders, there's a compulsion to just like, you always have to have it figured out. And I actually think that's reflects a level of insecurity that I don't aspire to whatsoever. I think when I'm in conversation with someone and I hear someone say, I don't know, like, I don't have a perfect answer, I find that incredibly compelling, because the people who always seem to have an immediate answer for everything and never skip a beat and seem to have it all figured out, like, I can't identify with that at all.
That's fair. What I'm going to say is I think the greatest space of winning right now, to me, is in empathy and inclusion. I think those are our winners. And I say that because I just think, like, no matter who you are, you get it. No one likes to feel left out.
Yeah.
And I don't care who you are, I think we've all had that feeling where we've been in a space where we didn't feel like we fit, or we were put in a situation where we didn't feel like we fit. And I don't know anybody who feels great about that. We find our ways maybe to get to fitting in, or we spend enough time at it, or whatever the situation is, or we leave the space, right? But nonetheless, I do find that such a relatable thing that, like, I don't care who you are or what your stance is. Like, you can respect the idea that someone doesn't feel like they fit. And since I operate from a space that I believe majority of all people are really, really good people, I don't think most people want to make people feel like they can't be included. And then my other part is empathy, because I do think with that also is finding the things where the win in empathy is finding the emotion where we're sharing same space mentally or emotionally or something, right? Like, we can relate to it. And I think there's a lot of space for that. And the reason I say those two things, because with empathy, I don't think someone can tell you, you're wrong with your empathy. So you can feel secure in it. If you can figure out how to be empathetic, like, you can win with that. And part of empathy could be the inclusion piece, right? And if you can go back to those times and spaces where you did not feel included and you would like to help others feel included for no other reason that you're just a good person. I just think those are winning spaces to operate through and from.
Absolutely. And I think there's something I've been, I think, particularly attuned to in this past year is I see a sort of proliferation of articles right now about like the growing number of people who feel lonely. I find that really interesting. And I think, I mentioned social health earlier. I think that's a really rich concept. I recently had a annual physical, and what I found interesting is during my intake paperwork, there were more questions about like how I'm doing socially, spending time with others, all that sort of stuff than any time I've ever gone to the doctor. And I find that really rich. And I think with that, if people can sort of tune into like, man, how does it feel when I feel lonely or alone, or if I'm in a place where I don't feel like I've, got someone who's got my back, like that's the worst feeling. Like it's really, really bad. And yeah, if you can channel that into empathy for like, okay, you know what? I'm willing to get out of my comfort zone, to be in dialogue and, learn about how I can show up better towards the end of trying to help other people have what I want. And that is to feel secure, to feel like I'm a part of something, to feel like I, belong, all that sort of stuff to me, yeah, that's where it's at.
All right. Any last words on this topic?
No, man. I appreciate it.
All right. It's that time of the show. We are starting to wind down this episode. Kosh listeners, I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for spending time with us. Thank you for giving us your minds and ears. Thank you for engaging in another topic that's super important to our community. I can't think of anything more important that's going to help our community grow than trying to figure out how we can help everyone feel like they belong and how we can include them and how we can be empathetic to those who need our empathy so we can help uplift them, more or less. It's not perfect. We're figuring it out, right? All right. So as you already know, we are a work in progress. If you would like to make suggestions to the show, how can we improve the show? If you'd like to be a guest, if you'd like to recommend a guest, please don't hesitate and reach out to us at askthekosh@gmail.com. Once again, that is askthekosh@gmail.com. And Kosh listeners, you already know I do have a request for you. Take some time while you're listening to this episode and hit the subscribe button. What that does, and also think about leaving us a review. I have had some reviews sent in recently. I appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time to do that review. What it does is it helps raise our analytics. We think we have something pretty special here. We think we have super great conversations, and we think more of our community members could benefit from them and learn from them and actually help make them better, however they choose to engage them. So just do those two things. Hit subscribe, leave a review. Appreciate you. All right. Now it is on to that time of the show, and that is shout out time. All right, Billy, what do you got?
I want to give a shout out. I have an amazing team that I feel super fortunate to work with. I was listening to a podcast a couple of days ago, and it was Amy Poehler of SNL movie fame, and she was talking about how she has like the best career because she gets to work with her best friends all the time, and I similarly feel really lucky to get to work with an amazing team. So I want to give a special shout out to Madeline Ames, Dr. Sasha T. Goldberg, Adam Jackson, Maria Lara, Dr. Renita Robinson, as well as my dear friend and colleague, and he's the bomb. He's a college football Hall of Famer, Don McPherson. I have what I think is just a super team. And yeah, they make doing work in this space super joyful, and I'm deeply grateful for them. I also want to give a shout out to my man, Daniel Webster. He was the guy who introduced us. Daniel is someone who I think he has an amazing knack for building community. And so I want to give him a shout out because, he made the introduction between the two of us. So I'm grateful for that.
Oh, yeah, facts. Daniel, he's about that life. That's my man right there. 100 grand. So big shout out to Daniel. Okay. You know what? I'm going to keep, if you, Kosh listeners, if you didn't know, this episode is the eve before New Year's Eve. And so I'm going to do what most people do.
Wait, is this like a season finale? Do you have seasons?
Well, I do. I consider a season a new annual year. So, yeah, this is the season finale.
So all of the sort of storylines of the Kosh throughout all the episodes culminate right here, is what you're saying.
For this year.
Okay, I love it.
Yeah. So I just want to send
honored.
a huge shout out. I like that. To every guest who's given that time, because whether you realize it or not, being on the Kosh, it takes time because we do long form format. So you're going to give up 2 hours of your time on a Saturday or a Sunday. So thank you for every guest who found it valuable enough to give us that time, because I do feel like time is the most valuable resource you can give anyone. And so thank you for giving it to myself and the listeners of the Kosh. I want to give a big thank you to every listener out there who's listening to these episodes, whether you listen for 5 minutes or you've listened to an hour and 5 minutes. I appreciate you. Thank you for finding us and the thing that we're doing here valuable enough to give us your valuable time, your minds, and your ears. That's why I say that every episode. I appreciate you so much. And then lastly, I want to send a special shout out to I get to engage so many different people on so many different levels. And I just want to say thank you for everybody who's part of my growth. I can't stress that enough. I know a lot of you may not even understand sometimes when you're part of my growth. There's people who are legitimately like my mentors. There's my people that I tend to lean on and go to. There's my family. And then there's just even these people, and I just had this happen to me yesterday, where I was sitting and hanging out with my man. Big shout out to Tarman again, one of the people that I'm directing this towards. And this young lady, she's like, "Oh, what is your name?" And I was like, "It's Timber." "Oh my God, I've listened to an episodes of the Kosh." And she's like, "Thank you for the things you're doing for the community." And I was just like, and like, I didn't know what to do with that, but she changed me. She energized me. She let me know that what I'm doing is of value, just with that simple one sentence. And so I want to say thank you to everyone out there that maybe I don't get to run into you, but I appreciate you all so many ways. So, okay, let's wrap this up. This is the last thing. And that is, you get 3 choices, Billy. Your 3 choices are, you can A, give us some parting words of wisdom. B, tell us, what would yourself today tell your 13-year-old self? Or option C, and as somebody who's worked in higher ed, it's not a good multiple choice if you don't have an option C, which is all of the above. You got to have both. Right. So what do you got?
I'm going to go with option A. And I want to share a line that just in my bones, I love this idea, and it rings in my brain just a lot. And that is, a value isn't a value unless it costs you something. So if your values only last right up to the point where it could cost you something, then surprise, they weren't your values in the first place.
Facts. What you think? All right. Thank you, Kosh listeners. Till the next time. The Kosh.